Hi, my name is Liz Joyal, and I'm the Director of Family Support Services at the Massachusetts Adoption Resource Exchange. We often go by MARE because we have a long name. And MARE is an agency in Massachusetts that helps the Department of Children and Families, DCF, find permanent homes for the children living in foster care who are waiting for an adoptive family. And our workshop this today is adoption from foster care. So the option of adoption from foster care. And I'm really excited to get to share with you. And just wanted to briefly start by going through what we're going to talk about in this workshop. We're going to overview the different types of adoption. We're going to talk about then foster care adoption mostly, specifically the need, and then who are the children and youth who are waiting to be adopted. And finally, what are the steps in the process of how this all works and how you could potentially do this. So wanted to start out just by giving a little overview of the types of adoption, because I know that some of you may be thinking through different options that you have. And so wanted to just talk about the three main types of adoption. And I'm more of an expert, although expert's a strong word, about foster care adoption. And so I'm definitely not an expert about domestic infant adoption or international or intercountry adoption, the other two main types. But do have colleagues and friends who have gone through these processes. So I know a little bit, enough to, I think, show some of the similarities and differences between them. So just to briefly go through this domestic infant adoption, which is probably what most people think about when they think of adoption. I've got some of the costs down there. I think $15,000 is probably on the very low side. I think it's much higher now. And then birth parents typically do select the adoptive family. That's when you would create a profile, a video after going through the process. And then consent to adoption is signed 4 days after birth at the earliest. Different states have different lengths of time, but the birth parent does need to sign a consent to adoption. Some states, it's about a week. I think the highest is about 14 days in some states. So it really depends on the state. Travel can be required in order to receive the child. Medical and social history are often available about the child and the birth family. And most adoptions are what are considered open, although it really depends on what the birth parent wants. And there's really a range in what that ends up being. But research has really shown the last generation or so how helpful it is for kids who are adopted, who have been adopted, to have some connection with their past. So that's why a lot of adoptions are open now. Then international, intercountry adoption, similar costs, high cost. Mostly the kids who are waiting in orphanages, sometimes in family care. About over half of them are age 1 to 4. So that's the typical age of a child, I believe, who would be adopted internationally. There are some under 12 months and a few also who are older than 4. These children are typically orphaned, abandoned. Perhaps they have one living parent, perhaps none, due to poverty, things like that. Travel and sometimes residency periods are required. So after even the process of being approved, there's paperwork that needs to be done, and oftentimes the family adopting needs to stay in the country for a specific amount of time. Mostly they're closed adoptions due to distance, but due to the situations. And then there are paths to citizenship, obviously, for the child who's adopted. And then the one that I know most about working at MARE is foster care adoption. There are really no costs associated with this process at all. That's really one of the main differences, is that there are no costs associated. The age of children are from newborn to 18, even more than 18 plus. And children are in the custody already of the Department of Children and Families due to neglect or abuse that they have experienced in their current situations or their situations prior to being in foster care. Birth parent rights are voluntarily signed over or terminated by the court, so one or the other happens. And matches are often initiated by social workers, but they're not forced on the family in any way. There's also, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but there are also things like mass health and subsidy provided. And again, most of these adoptions are open adoptions based on what I was talking about before, about how it's actually really helpful for kids to have some connection with their past. And please feel free to write any questions or comments you have in the chat, and we can respond as well. And then just a little bit more about who can adopt in these different types of adoption. And these are really broad strokes for domestic infant adoption, intercountry and international adoption, very broad strokes. Different agencies would say different things. So it's hard to summarize this completely, but a number of agencies would want you to be at least 25 and have sometimes have like an age range of 30 to 50. Some do restrict single persons or those with disabilities. Some might still restrict LGBTQ plus persons, single men, or unmarried couples. There often are income requirements because the costs are so high. There's often a limit of number of children you can have in the home. And sometimes there are educational requirements for the adoptive parents. And then in foster care adoption, you really just need to be 21 or older. There's no upper limit in terms of age. You can be single or partnered. There's no income minimum, but you do need to just show that you're financially stable and can raise a child. You can be a renter or a homeowner. LGBTQ plus individuals and couples are welcome. You can have kids in the home, no kids in the home. And there is a limit of number of children really based on space and not necessarily number. So anything else I would add about requirements for adoption, and especially in terms of adoption and foster care, really the ability to advocate for your child, be able to make noise at a school if needed, having a good sense of humor. It's a lot to bring two different families together, and it's just easier to meet those things with some humor. Willingness to learn new ways to manage behavior. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit, but no matter what the age is, even if a child is adopted at birth, there is a great loss of their birth parent. So every child has experienced some sort of loss, and then some kids trauma or neglect either before or after birth. And that affects managing behavior. And there's lots of learning, there's lots of extra trainings that we offer on that, but being able to be willing to learn new ways to manage behavior is really key. Flexibility too, and the ability to tolerate the unknown is helpful. And really being on the same page as your partner, if you have one, that's actually really important. And, some people, and if you're in a couple, come to adoption at different times. Usually there's one who is leading the way, leading the charge, and that's totally fine if the other partner is bringing up the rear a little bit. But at some point, you both need to be on the same page for wanting this. So wanted to briefly just talk about adoption from foster care, because I think it is one of the lesser known types of adoptions, and what exactly is the need. So I got a really big slide with this really big number because it is a big need. There are 400,000 children and teens in foster care across the United States. That's a lot of kids. But to kind of bring it down to little bit easier to comprehend. So in Massachusetts, and again, we're the Massachusetts Adoption Resource Exchange. I know not all of you may be from Massachusetts, but to bring it down to scale a little bit, there are 8,400 children in foster care in Massachusetts. And these are children that have been removed from their families due to abuse or neglect. And their first goal is always to be reunited. That's the first goal that the Department of Children and Families has, is how can we reunite them with their family? But 3,100 of these children actually have the goal of adoption, meaning that DCF has determined that reunification is not going to be possible. And so another type of permanency will need to be found for these children. So 3,100 do have the goal of adoption. And 800 of these, somewhere in 800, 850 of the children who are waiting for adoption don't have an identified potential adoptive parent. So the others, a large portion of these 3,100 kids and teens, have an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a grandparent, or even their current foster parent who is able to offer permanency. But there are 800 of these kids who are waiting for adoption who have no available resource to help them in that way. So that is where you come in. A child needs you. So just to explain the need, there is definitely a need. There are kids waiting in foster care right at this moment for an adoptive family. And so a little more about who are these children and youth? Who are these children and teens? There's a lot of text on this slide. I'll kind of just try to break it down a little bit. And I don't mean it to be overwhelming, but if we start over on the left, again, I mentioned this before, the waiting children and teens, they're from any age, 18 infants to 18 plus. We do even have a few 20, 21-year-olds who are still looking for an adoptive family, someone that they can call if the car breaks down or if they need relationship advice. Everyone needs someone. But I would say most are between the ages of 6 and 14. So that's where most of the kids, kind of that, school age child. They're children of many racial and ethnic backgrounds. I always like to acknowledge that there is disproportionality in child welfare. There are more children and teens of color who are waiting for families than the population. So there's a lot of transracial adoption happens. These children and teens right now, they're in foster care due to abuse or neglect, as we mentioned, and they right now are living either in a foster home or in a group care setting. They may have emotional, physical, medical, behavioral, or intellectual challenges due to the trauma they've experienced. I think about 40% of them are sibling groups who really belong together. They would be great for them to be able to grow up together, even if they can't grow up with their birth parents, they can grow up together. And then many have some connection with a member of their birth family. Not everyone, some, and again, the open adoption can range anywhere from just updates, letters, to in-person visits a couple times a year. Now, in that second column, the greatest need in adoption and foster care exists for families to parent youth who are 10 and older. So that's the greatest need: sibling groups, kids of color, LGBTQ plus identified youth, and those with complex medical and developmental needs. Now, I don't want that to be overwhelming. Not every child fits in all of those categories, but just to say those are the kind of groups of kids that we have the greatest need to find families for. And then talked a little bit about legal risk, legally freed. So approximately 30% of children who are waiting for adoptive families are legally freed. So that means that a judge has already terminated the birth parent rights, or the parents themselves have surrendered those rights. And then legal risk, most of them are at what we would call legal risk to the birth parent. Even though DCF has the goal of adoption, the court is still in the process of determining if parental rights should be terminated. And rather than waiting for that process to be complete and more of a child's childhood to go by, because the courts are very backed up, DCF is looking for families sooner than that to place children in, with the goal of adoption, with the case heading in that direction. And then I do want to just go back a little bit to the effects of trauma. And I think just to be real, not to be depressing, but just to be real, that there is need here because kids have been affected by trauma, and all to different degrees, and there's a spectrum, and not every child or teen is affected in each of these categories. Some just a little, some not at all, some more than others. But brain development, emotional regulation, academic progress, behavior, social interactions, attachment can all be effects of trauma. Again, this is not a prescription or anything like that, but it is something that can happen. These are things that can happen. And even just to mention a little bit off of one, attachment, there's been a lot more research in the effects of trauma in the last generation or so, but attachment, super important when a child is a baby. And just if you know anything about the attachment cycle, it's basically the first 3 years of a child's life is mostly the child's crying or expressing a need and the parent responding and meeting that need, which builds attachment. And then when that isn't present in those first 3 years, it has effects on the child. The child's basically learning not to be attached. And that's where these other things can come in terms of behavior, social interactions, academic progress. So I don't mean to be depressing. I just want to be real. So there it is. But there is hope. Thank goodness we're not ending on a depressing note. There is hope. And there's been a lot of research in the last generation as well, really about the plasticity of the brain, basically meaning the brain is able to re-regulate and able to change, but not in a group care situation, not in an orphanage, not in a residential situation, but in a family. So the effects of trauma, any trauma is bad. But trauma, when it happens to you from a caregiver, someone who's supposed to care for you, is really especially grievous. But there is hope, and that is that relational trauma can be healed through relational connection. And that is where you can come in as an adoptive parent or couple and your family that can meet the needs of these children, helping them heal. So, and again, I don't want to be too much of a downer, but I just want to say all of these kids have experienced at least some type of loss, but there is hope. And that's where you come in, is to help these children grow, heal, and transition to adulthood in a way that they wouldn't have been able to without you. So I wanted to just stop for a moment and just pause and share my own story in brief, not because I have lots of photos. I love sharing pictures, not because I want to just share photos of myself with you, but because I think it's helpful to just not talk about this so abstractly, but a little bit personally. So if it's okay, I'm going to share a little personally with you today. So this is my husband and I. We were married in 2002. And then I have that timeline of 2006 to 2009, because that was really the time that we were specifically really trying to get pregnant and just were unable to. Not ever really clear why. There was no clear explanation. We went as far as we wanted to fertility wise, and just it didn't happen. But that's a picture of us in those, I think, around those years. And dealing with that, and some of you may have experienced that, right? Where you're just trying every month for who knows how many months and disappointed afterwards. And so, really going through that tough time. And then we came to a place where we were like, okay, I guess this isn't in the cards for us. And kind of just went back to our careers. Friends were having a great time. We were having a grand old time. And then, really somehow we were confronted with the need and the kids who were waiting in foster care, and we couldn't shake it. And I think realizing that we had a home and that there were kids out there that needed a home. So that began our process of going through the process to get licensed to adopt from foster care that I will describe later. And at the end of that, we were licensed and were ready to receive a placement of a child. And so this was a number of years after that. So in 2017, in March, we met this boy named Javiel. He was 10, just about to turn 11 in this photo. We met him after we'd been matched with him. We were in his foster parents' home. That's the couch that was in their living room. And this was us meeting him for the very first time. He had picture day at school that day. He was in 4th grade. And that's why he has his best blue shirt on. You can see it's a little too short, a little typical in foster care, unfortunately, sometimes. But what's really kind of neat is that we actually have a professional photo of him from the day we met him. And so we got to know him. This first meeting lasted a little bit over an hour. First, we were just sitting in the living room, this poor kid with all these adults. The social worker was there. His foster parent was there, kind of talking about him. And eventually he said, you want to go outside? And so we got to throw a football around with him, kick a soccer ball. But that was when we met him, and the process really started of him transitioning into our home. So just wanted to really want to share my story, because I want to say that I'm telling you how to do this as someone who's gone through the process, and would do it again in a heartbeat. So I have a few more photos that I do want to share. So this was shortly after that, we were able to get him his first bike. This is a trail that we were able to ride our bikes on together. These were some family pictures we took later that year. And then another one after that. And then this was a year, if you do the math, it's about a year later, we were able to finalize the adoption. So he was just about to turn 12, and we had this is a typical photo of an adoption finalization. The judges love these days because they get to, most of what they have to deal with those days are good news. And this is your typical photo. The judge lets the child bang the gavel, and our son did a really great job that day. He was almost 12. This was not his, goal in life to have a second family, but he's tried really hard to deal with the losses in his life and to move forward with that with us as well. So we're really grateful for him. And then I have some more photos that I want to share, because not just to show photos of us, but I think it's a helpful kind of visual in the way that family is created in adoption from foster care. It's different. I think a lot of us, when we think about parenting, we imagine holding an infant in our arms. And this is not the case most of the time with adoption from foster care. And I think a lot of times it's like, wow, but isn't there so much that you miss and so much that you don't get to do? And yes, of course, that's true. We didn't get to see his first steps. And sometimes that does make me sad, but there are also so many firsts that we were able to do with him. His first apple picking, like I said, his first bike, first family vacation. We did go to Disney World. We went to amusement parks. We took him to a Red Sox game, his first Red Sox game. We got him his first pet. So many firsts that he had not been able to experience before. So there is just so many that of family life that is still there, and that he deserves to have. He deserved to have all of these firsts, even though he didn't get some of them in his life. So yeah, 6th grade graduation, another family pic. I love that Christmas photo because even the dog is looking at the camera. We haven't quite been able to recreate that since. And then this was a trip we were able to take to Puerto Rico. Our son is Puerto Rican, and he had never been to Puerto Rico. We're white. We felt it was really important to celebrate his culture, to bring him there. And if you look at the date, we got that in right under the gun. There were a few rumblings of things to come, March 2020, but we were really grateful that we were able to get that trip in and to, help him connect to his culture more and celebrate that with him. It's another Christmas photo. My own graduation. I put that there just because another just kind of family life photo, that he's part of our family. And after we adopted Javiel, I realized that I would become more passionate about finding homes for kids like him who are waiting in foster care than the career I was in. So I went back to school to get my social work degree, and then ended up working here at Mayer through that process. And then his 8th grade graduation that year as well. I think I have a few other photos. Oh, this was his birthday when he turned 16. So this was over a year ago, but it is one of the last photos I have with him wanting to smile in a photo with us, since he's a teenager now. I think I do have one from last Christmas that I couldn't find, but he turned 16 because of the pandemic. He was also a year older than a lot of his peers because he'd repeated a grade before we knew him. We were able to throw him a coming of age party for his birthday. So traditionally it's the quinceañera for the girls, the 15th birthday for the boys. But we were able to have that type of party for him, which was really special to celebrate his culture too. And then here he is getting his driver's license. And then this is my most recent photo of him. He actually let me take a picture of him. He's 17 now because he was going to a party and he knew he looked good. So he didn't want a first day of school photo, but he did let me take this photo, which is a few days before that. So he's doing great. We have a teenager. We're all still alive. It's possible to do that. But I did just want to share, just a little bit about our story, because just to show some photos and just to make it a little more real than just numbers and an abstract idea. But we would do this again in a heartbeat. It hasn't always been easy. I'm sure there's challenges when two families come together when a kid is 10, but we're really grateful for him and who he is and who he's becoming. So wanted to then now go back to our agenda and talk about the steps in the adoption process. So the very first step, and this is in Massachusetts, so I know not everyone is from Massachusetts, but it's a similar process in other states. So do just want to go over the steps just so you have an idea about, and then I'll talk about the timeline a little bit later. But basically you fill out an application with an agency. So Massachusetts Department of Children and Families is the main agency, but there are also a few private agencies that DCF contracts with in order to help families get ready for adoption. The agencies, again, DCF is the state agency. They also are the agency that work directly with the children, birth families, that have kids in care, but they also have units in each region that are preparing pre-adoptive families to adopt. And then these private we call them contracted agencies. It's like a technical term. It's not a great word, but basically DCF contracts with several licensed adoption agencies across DCF to assist in this work. And these agencies approve families for adoption and also assist with matching them with the waiting children. And now you can visit our booth in the exhibit hall, and it has information about this. Not every adoption agency in Massachusetts will license you to adopt from foster care. In general, most of the home studies for adoption are not, you can't use them for the other types of adoption. So if you're paying for a license for domestic infant adoption, you can't use it for foster care adoption and vice versa. So I think that's just helpful to make sure that you know that, is that the processes don't overlap or work with one another. Different trainings, it's all related to what the agency is licensed for. So there are actually only 6 other contracted agencies that will license you to adopt from foster care, and we'll have a list of those in our exhibit. But some people, you get to choose. Some people like the feel of a smaller agency. Some people, want to work directly with DCF. That's totally fine. So after you select an agency, and here at MARE, that's part of what we do, is help families navigate the process. So you can visit our booth again. I'll put my contact info in the chat, but you can connect with me and I can help you choose an agency. The next step is the training, is the MAP training. It's called MAP, Master's Approach to Partnerships and Parenting. It's 30 hours worth of training. It's required for all foster and adoptive families. The 30 hours, don't think of it as, some of it is virtual, some of it is with a cohort. It really helps you prepare for adopting from foster care, and really helps you understand the process as well, all the different players involved. So it includes you can see this information that is included in the training. Some of what we've talked about, impact of trauma on child development, tools and techniques, supporting your child with their birth family connections, with their culture, understanding the support agencies that are there for you before and after the finalization. So there's that training. And then kind of concurrently, or maybe a little bit after, is your social worker who's been assigned to you does your license study. There's a little bit of pre-screening that occurs, like just making sure there's enough room in your home, that it's safe, and the running of the background checks that happens before the MAP training. But then the real meat of the process is this license study. So that includes usually 3 to 4 interviews and home visits by your social worker, where they'll come to your home, kind of like any other adoption home study, really get to know you, understand your past, present, and really just, they want to get to know you, figure out what makes you tick. There's no, wrong answers, but they just want to make sure that you've dealt with good and bad that you've gone through in your life and come out on the other side. And they also assess your strengths and your abilities, your parenting style, help you identify the type of child that would fit best in your family. Medical, personal, and employment references are required at this point. And then once the social worker writes up this thing that becomes like a 12 to 15 page paper about you and your family, then you sign it, the social worker signs it, and at that point you are licensed to adopt from foster care. And your home study can be shared with other social workers who have kids on their caseload to match you with a child or children. So then step 4, waiting for your children. So just in terms of a timeline, the steps up until matching. So from applying or just first connecting with an agency to having your home study completed, somewhere between, gosh, I wish I had a better answer with this. Somewhere around 8 to 10 to 12 months. Really depends on the agency. You have some agency in this as well, in terms of being the first one to get your references done, being the first one to answer the questions that they ask you, getting your fingerprints done as soon as you can. So DCF is actually in the process right now of changing things so that the process is trying to be streamlined because the pandemic did elongate things. So I would say before the pandemic, it was 6 to 8 months from application to being licensed. It's somewhere between 6 to 12 months at this point, but the hope is to get it back consistently to that 6 to 8 month period, or maybe even shorter. So then step 4, waiting for your children. That is when you get to take an active role in finding a child. And that's where a lot of families come back to us here at MARE. We are not an adoption licensing agency, so we can't do your home study or your required training. But a lot of our work involves providing matching services like adoption meet and greets, both virtual and in person, where you get to meet with social workers, sometimes even with the children and teens, photo and video profiles that we have on our website. Once you have a license, you can inquire about a specific child and we can connect you with their social worker. We also have family support events and trainings. And then as well, DCF has some of those services as well. So a lot of times families really come back to us for those matching services. I would say a match happens in one of 3 ways. One is that the adoption meet and greet, a networking event. Second is through our photo and video profiles on our website. And then third is your social worker may connect with a social worker who has a child on their caseload, and that's how the match originates. That's how our match was actually made. Was our social worker was friends with Javiel's social worker, and they were talking and thought, oh, how about Liz and Paul and Javiel? Interesting, that could be. And so then the next step is really the process of being matched. So the match originates in those other ways, but then really at that point, you have many conversations about a child and about a potential match. So that's really the difference between adoption and foster care in Massachusetts, is that if you're a foster parent, you could be called today and someone say, we've got an 8-year-old boy, he's sweet, but he still wets the bed. Could we bring him over tomorrow? That might be most of the information that you get about the child. And you say, sure, we've got a bed, we've got room. But in adoption, because it's for permanency, many more conversations go into that. And so you do go to what's called a disclosure meeting. And it's just like it sounds like. DCF discloses everything that they know about the child and the child's history. So medical history, daycare or school history, academic history. And just like you have a home study written up, the child has a child assessment written up about them that talks about anything that DCF knows in terms of even mental health history of the family, just like all of that different stuff. So, and you'll also have the opportunity to talk with important people in the child's life, collateral information. We called our son's therapist at the time before we said yes. We could have called his teacher, but we didn't think we needed to. We did get to talk to his foster parent a good amount to gather more information. And you're given this in a written summary. And so after that disclosure meeting, you're basically given everything that you should need to know. I mean, and again, DCF doesn't know everything. If they weren't connected with the child until they were 6 or 7, as is in our case, we don't know a ton about his first 6 years of life. We really don't. And he's not a talker about his past, so that's part of it too. But you'll get to a place where you feel comfortable about saying yes and going from there. So then step 6 is the visitation. And that's when you create with the child's social worker a transition plan. That was that picture that I showed, that first picture of us with our son. The first visit, we eventually had him over to our house for an afternoon. He got to look around, look at the bedroom that would be his. Then we were getting him signed up for Little League in our town. And so we had him come out for that. Eventually, he had an overnight before moving in permanently. And so that's the visitation schedule. It really depends on the needs of the child. I think the rule of thumb is about 1 week per year of the child. So a 10-year-old in our case, maybe a 2-month, 8 to 10 week transition would have been a good idea. But we made it quicker at DCF's suggestion, basically to get him into school near us right after April vacation, which made sense because the school year was running out. So. And then after that, that's that other photo I showed is adoption day. So in Massachusetts, children must live with a family full time for a minimum of 6 months before that adoption can be finalized. But the courts are backed up, and so rarely does that happen before a year and a half after the child's been placed with you. And so just wanted to also share a few frequently asked questions after having talked about the process. That's like the main gist of the process. We have much more information on our website. And also we have other ways that you could connect with us and we can share even more with you, have phone calls, things like that. So again, no costs. There are really no costs in adoption from foster care. And I can say that personally, we really haven't paid a penny. There's no legal fees. DCF covers all of that. They cover the home study costs, the training costs. There's really just the cost to raising a child, right? We did have to pay for the Xbox and things like that, but there's no hidden costs or anything like that. I did talk about the length of the process. So again, that kind of 6 to 8 to 10-ish, 8 to 12 months of going through the licensing process. And then on top of that is the matching process. Now, because we were open to an older child, to a sibling group, to a child of color, that the ink on our home study was still drying when we got calls from social workers. So that's where the need is. So we had I think our home study was finalized in February of 2017. We met Javi in March and he moved in April. So there you go. But if you are hoping, and I understand that people have parameters based on if there's children already in the home or whatever, but if the more you narrow your parameters in terms of age, race, gender, needs that you can handle, then the longer it will be to wait. So there is, there's a huge wait for kids 0 to 2, 0 to 4. And sometimes, honestly, I would say it doesn't happen. There's no list that you're put on. It's just, there's lots of people want really young kids, but there are a ton of kids who are older who are waiting for homes. Another question that folks often ask is about post-placement and post-finalization supports. DCF contracts with different agencies to offer free supports to you. So while before finalization, you have all the rights and responsibilities of a foster parent because the child is still in foster care until that finalization. So there are trainings, there are support groups, people that you can reach out to for help. And then there's also an agency that DCF contracts with for post-finalization support. And then part of that support also, I will add kind of in the cost section as well, is that there are more benefits for children who are in the foster care system. So while the child is in foster care, so before finalization, you receive the foster care stipend. So I think right now it's about $35 a day for the child. And it's not, some people go, oh, why? I don't want to receive any of that money. It's not that much money, but it does help. I mean, with our son, he had a lot of energy to get out, a lot of angst to get out. We must have gone to Sky Zone, one of those trampoline parks, all the time. So that it really helped. That if the child is older than 8, your social worker can apply for that stipend to continue post finalization. And that stipend could be more if the child has special needs as well, because you're doing a service. You're really helping the state raise a child better than it can do itself. And so they want to help you do that. Another benefit is that any child who has been in foster care at any point is eligible for Mass Health up to their 18th birthday or longer if they continue in school. And so our son, we kept him on Mass Health. We could have put him on our own insurance, but it was cheaper to keep him on Mass Health. We're in an area where that is not an issue at all to find a provider. But we've never paid a copay. And he's only had a couple specialists. So, but we're really grateful for that. And then any child who has been in foster care at any point is also eligible for free tuition and fees at an in-state college or university. So not out of state, but at a UMass or any of the state schools, a Worcester State, Fitchburg State, any of those schools, free tuition and fees, not free room and board, but because you probably, if you have an older child, you haven't been saving for college for them. And just to say, not every child is obviously going to go to college, but those helps are there as well. So those are the general FAQs that folks have. You may have many other questions. This is just a cursory overview of foster care adoption. Please feel free to contact me. Just send me an email, lizj@mareinc.org. And then please visit our website at www.mareinc.org. We've got lots of information, lots of video snapshots of some of the kids and teens who are waiting, really like short videos about them, just so you can know who these kids are, lots of photos and little profiles about them, some other information about the process. We have other sessions that you can come and learn more, but I'd love to just give you more information. Please, please, please contact me. And please also feel free to drop some questions in the chat and then also to visit our exhibit booth. So thanks so much for your time. Appreciate this opportunity to share about the option of adoption from foster care. Thank you.